I'm Edward October. The sounds you hear are midnight in October, on the lonely path through a sequestered glen, which has long been known by the name of Sleepy Hollow. This is the start of Octoberpod. You see, in the bosom of one of those spacious coves which indent the eastern shore of the Hudson, at that broad expansion of the river denominated by the ancient Dutch navigators the Tappan Zee, there lies a small market town, or rural port, which by some is called Greensburg, but which is more generally and properly known by the name of Tarrytown. This name was given, we are told, in former days, by the good housewives of the adjacent country, from the inveterate propensity of their husbands to linger about the village tavern on market days. Not far from this village, there is a little valley, or rather lap of land among the high hills, which is one of the quietest places in the whole world. A drowsy, dreamy influence seems to hang over the land, and to pervade its very atmosphere. Some say that the place was bewitched by a high German doctor during the days of the settlement. Others that an old Indian chief, the prophet or wizard of his tribe, held his powwows there. Their words, not ours. The whole neighborhood abounds with twilight tales, haunted spots, and local superstitions. Dominant spirit, however, that haunts this enchanted region and seems to be commander-in-chief of all the powers of the air is the apparition of a figure on horseback without a head. It is said by some to be the ghost of a Hessian trooper whose head had been carried away by a cannonball in some nameless battle during the Revolutionary War, and who is ever and anon seen by the country folk hurrying along in the gloom of night, as if on the wings of the wind, in nightly quest for his head, only to hurry back to the churchyard before daybreak. The Brides of Sleepy Hollow, adapted especially for Octoberpod by John Eiger, from an original idea by Edward October, inspired by Washington Irving's tale, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
And so it was that an itinerant schoolmaster, one Ichabod Crane, came to live and teach the children in the sleepy village of Tarrytown. He was tall and exceedingly lank, and his coming was the subject of a great deal of gossip. Ichabod Crane was a superstitious man. He threw salt over his shoulder when it spilled, avoided stepping on cracks in the floor or pavement, and loved stories about witches and goblins. He knew Mather's witchcraft in New England by heart. His knowledge of the subject of witchcraft and black magic rivaled even that of the parson. One night, on All Hallows' Eve, Schoolmaster Crane attended a harvest frolic at the home of Baltus Van Tassel, the wealthiest farmer in the county, riding a borrowed horse. Upon his return to old Van Ripper's stable to return the horse he'd borrowed, Ichabod Crane traversed the road through Sleepy Hollow. It was the very witching hour of the night. And Sleepy Hollow is a known haunt of demons, spooks, and goblins.
The Facts in the Case of Ichabod Crane by Jane Nightshade. Narrated by Ari Shey.
Ichabod heard hoofbeats behind him, and he spurred Van Ripper's nag, called Gunpowder, to a pitched gallop, or as close to one as the old horse could muster. Still, the unknown rider's hoofbeats kept pace, and then Ichabod turned to see who was following him. It was the fabled Headless Horseman, a phantom in a foreign soldier's uniform with no head. Ichabod spurred Gunpowder to fly at an unheard-of pace, so say the housewives of Tarrytown, and rode for his life. But by dawn, there was found no trace of Ichabod Crane, save for Van Ripper's listlessly wandering, riderless old nag, a smashed pumpkin, and the schoolmaster's hat trampled in the dirt. What happened next? Heaven only knows, not I. But there are those who say that the Headless Horseman launched his disembodied head in the fashion of a cannonball at the schoolmaster, and then, having rendered poor Ichabod immobile, collected the pedagogue's head. There are those in Sleepy Hollow who practice magic, it is said. Some of these traffic with the evil one, but the old religion is strong in Sleepy Hollow, and black rites of necromancy are not unheard of there. Beware the Hollow in those dark hours when evil is exalted, else you may surely meet the Headless Horseman. So ends the legend of Sleepy Hollow. And what, may I ask, do you think of that, Captain Knickerbocker?
Miss Crane, now I'm certain you're distraught over the fate of your brother. It's been how long since Ichabod Crane was allegedly spirited away?
It's been nearly a year since that dark fate befell him, but word only just reached me a month ago. It takes so long for news from the country to reach our native Connecticut. And to think I've been laboring all this time under the assumption that my brother was alive and well and teaching school in some far-off hamlet, never once dreaming that he...
There, Miss Crane. May I call you Eliza? Sit down, Eliza, and have a draught of apple brandy. It's got an awful smack to it, but it's good for the nerves. Now, I've found myself in many frightening situations since
Dear
my
Bessie,
time in
I met with Captain Diedrich Knickerbocker at his study in Manhattan this afternoon, and he really is marvelous. Yet this famous war hero and renowned witch hunter was nothing like the picture of him I'd conjured in my mind. I expected a man more akin to a gaunt seminarian, forever thumping a well-worn volume of Cotton Mather, Brother Ichabod's favorite writer. Instead, I was greeted with this stubborn, gray, grizzled veteran with a long, unkempt salt and pepper beard. I say stubborn because of his positive reluctance to take on
blew
my
that
case.
horse so far in the air that the next morning we found him hanging from the church steeple. But that's beside the point. What I'm telling you is that the world's a strange place, Miss Eliza. You don't have to be a witch hunter to know that not all the strangeness that abounds should be attributable to witches and heathens. Men like Ichabod Crane go missing all the time. And it's just as likely he's found himself a good Dutch housewife who's a fine cook and decided to sire himself an heir. Perhaps he's gone off and electioneered himself to a position of political power. By God, it seems like every politician nowadays is a dark horse with a shady past. Sometimes a man just decides to up and disappear and become somebody new. Hell, I've seen it happen 100 times since the war ended.
But what do you make of the legend?
I don't make anything of it. These rustic lads in Tarrytown, these Sleepy Hollow boys, why, they're all schnooker and schnapps. You can't believe every 10-mile tale spun by some rough, wrong-headed Dutch urchin. You said he was sweet on this farm girl of his, Katerina van der Saddle?
Van Tassel.
So he's sweet on her and pitches woo to her at the party. She rejects him. Then he rides off broken-hearted and decides to cut his losses and move to some other town. It happens 100 times every day, I'd warrant.
Or he could have been murdered.
Yes, murder is a possibility. And I'll be hanged if it's not more probable than him being spirited away by ghosts and witch doctors. But if you believe in your heart that it's murder, Eliza, then what you need to hire is a detective, not a witch hunter. Either way, I can't help you. I see nothing here that requires even an ounce of experience with the occult.
The legend I recounted to you concerning my brother's death, or disappearance, was sent to me in a small parcel with no return address. The legend was accompanied with an unsigned letter, written in an unknown hand, asking me to come to Sleepy Hollow to learn the truth about Brother Ichabod. Now, I'm no fool. I don't think it would be safe or prudent to go myself. But if you went on my behalf...
Eliza, I'm just an old infantryman who knows a fair amount about witches and black magic. I still don't see how I can possibly help you with finding a missing person or solving a murder.
The parcel with the letter in it also contained this. It is a braided lock of my brother's hair. Before you protest, Captain, I know it's Ichabod's hair, because the braid is tied with a ribbon that had belonged to our saintly mother. There's also a charm tied to the braid. Do you see it there? It bears a strange mark upon it.
Yes! That symbol. Looks to be some kind of fetish. Druidical in nature, if I'm not mistaken. Smell that? It's pungent, like an exotic oil. This braid's been doused with a tincture of tannis root. And tannis root, my dear, is like catnip for devil worship.
It required all of my power of persuasion, dear Cousin Bessie, but by and by, Captain Knickerbocker agreed to take on my case. He didn't even haggle over his fee.
Very well, Miss Eliza Crane. You've hired yourself a witch hunter. I'll leave for Tarrytown in the morning. By God's grace, I'll find your brother, with or without his head. Journal of Captain Dietrich Knickerbocker, September 7th. Book passage for Tarrytown. Coach leaves on the morrow, noontime. Nota bene. Packed volume of cotton mather for journey. Look especially for references to tannis root. September 7th, addendum. Received note slipped under door at my residence. See note attached to this leaf. It reads, quote, My dear Captain K, I have information vital to your investigations into the matter of Mr. C, a country school teacher. Come to the Epicurean Club near Federal Hall and tell the porter you're expected by Mr. Fox. Arrive promptly at 6 p.m. if quite convenient. If not convenient, come all the same.
The Witch Hunter by Dan B. Fierce. Narrated by Tom O'Connor as Captain Knickerbocker.
Very well do I know the island of Manhattan, especially the streets leading to Federal Hall. I'd never been inside the Epicurean Club, though I knew it by reputation. I handed my calling card, my walking stick, and my cloak to the porter, who ushered me into a quiet reading room to await Mr. Fox. I pulled the hagstone I always carry from my waistcoat pocket and held it to my right eye, scanning the old trouts, smoking cigars, and reading dusty volumes of Cicero in an effort to detect any signs of witchery, but found nothing notable in any of their dull auras. I must have sighed audibly, for some ancient gentleman with drooping whiskers shushed me. A light step arrested my attention, and I found a man in dark garb. His collar was lined with red fur. Fox! We exchanged knowing glances, as if to silently say, "Mr. Fox, I presume." "Yes, I'm Mr. Fox. Pleased to make your acquaintance, sir. I'm Captain Knickerbocker. I know. Won't you follow me?" The man in the fox-lined collar led me to a darkened corner of an uninhabited room in the club. We sat in curved-back chairs opposite a fire beneath the gaze of some stern, high German theologian's portrait. I offered to wring the man's hand, but he did not return the gesture. "This is a fine refuge you've found here. By God, all we need now is a draught of rum."
I'm afraid I do not imbibe spirits of any kind. My doctor forbids it.
Is that so? I understand you have some information for me about some school teacher? Mr. Fox puffed on his long-stemmed pipe with a soured look on his face.
As I recall, Miss Eliza Crane has employed you to find whoever or whatever killed her brother, one Ichabod Crane, a pedagogue in the sleepy hamlet of Tarrytown. Well, I must question your reasons for looking into this matter, sir. You see, you're looking for a murderer when he's already been found.
You mean they caught the devil?
That is the rumor.
The man's face remained stony, but the bead of sweat trickling down his pale cheek told a different story. But in your notes, sir, you mentioned something about vital information?
The information was merely that which I just conveyed. And so you see, it would be a dreadful shame if you were to make such a long and perilous journey in vain.
You seem very certain that the pedagogue met his end due to foul play. Foul play done upon him by the hands of a mortal man. And yet his sister, Miss Crane that is, and a good many of the townsfolk believe the schoolmaster was spirited away by the Headless Horseman, or any one of the wandering spooks in that vicinity.
Old housemaids, simpletons, and rustic country bumpkins to the last one. Surely a man, a war hero no less, so worldly as yourself, is not so easily taken in by the old world superstitions of the rabble.
The man in the fox-lined collar took one final drag on his pipe as he stood. He tapped the bowl on the edge of a side table, loosening the pipe's smoke contents into a heap on the spotless white marble floor. He stood, clicked his boot heels, and with a tight bow said,
"Do not venture into Sleepy Hollow, Captain. I am certain you'd be far more comfortable if you remained here in Manhattan, for the chill of autumn has already reached that sequestered glen, and it really won't do, you know, for your health."
Miss Crane, I have just left a meeting which confirms my suspicion that forces, both human and infernal, are at work to prevent us from arriving at the truth regarding your brother's fate. It is my belief that your brother's arrival in Sleepy Hollow may not have been mere coincidence, but a cog in the machinery of some great conspiracy. I fear that Ichabod's scholarly affinity for witchery and diabolism may have aroused the attention of some very powerful men, and thus led to his undoing. The role of the Galloping Hessian remains an enigma, if such a goblin truly exists. The subject of such a spun yarn might be merely a scapegoat for more ethereal misdeeds, and on this matter even I remain a skeptic. Take heed, dear Eliza. Those behind Ichabod's disappearance are men of influence, and not to be trifled with. I fear that my discovery of their involvement may have already ensnared me. Take care that you do not find yourself in their web. Time is of the essence, and caution even more so. Today I travel by coach to Tarrytown to find more answers. I beg of you to carry your brother in your heart and leave this matter to a higher power, though I shall endeavor to uncover all that I can. Your humble servant, I remain, Captain D. Knickerbocker. Postscript. If you are contacted by a Mr. Fox, an assumed name, I'd stake my eye teeth on it, or any of his associates, stay well clear. I believe that he means you harm. September 7th. Left Manhattan just after noon. Journey uneventful thus far. Weather unseasonably crisp. Agenda. Post letter to Miss Crane when arrived Tarrytown. Interview magistrate, parson, gossipy housewives. Inquire with H. Van Ripper regarding... Coachman! Why have we stopped? Coachman! The coachman had vanished, leaving me, the stubborn horses, and indeed the whole coach behind. Well, this is damn peculiar. These horses weren't just being stubborn. They were spooked, and that's why they wouldn't budge. The sun set swiftly, and before I could get my bearings, it became so dark I could hardly see the hem of my breeches. I fumbled about and found a lantern and lit it. Such a desolate road to be stranded on. I called out for the coachman a few more times. Could he have stopped to unburden his bladder in the bushes? The night was thick, as was the silence. Even the horses seemed to be holding their breath. And if I strained my ears, I could make out the skittering of small creatures in the dark. Something was amiss. I survived the bloodiest days fighting the redcoats, and I'll be damned if I'll allow this to frighten... What was that? No, it can't be! It's you!
Dearest Bessie, nearly 2 months have passed, and having received no word from Captain Knickerbocker, I have taken it upon myself to search for my brother. I have no idea where the captain disappeared to, but I dare say the fee I paid disappeared along with him. I arrived in Sleepy Hollow, or rather Tarrytown, just before noon this morning. It's an oppressive place, dear cousin. utterly devoid of the charm and joy that Brother Ichabod imbued it with in his letters. Poor, pitiful Ichabod. I do hope to find him alive, but if not alive, I hope he has found peace in the loving arms of his Creator. I inquired at the tavern about seeing a local judge or a justice of the peace. A man informed me that none was available. Furthermore, he said it's unlikely any officers of the court would be available until the county's executioner comes, which should be any day now. Nevertheless, he directed me to a primitive jailhouse where I might speak to a deputy. There, I discovered and introduced myself to the jailer, mein Herr Heinrich Geller. I met him at the door where he'd just been handed a bundle of clean linens from a handsome but otherwise downtrodden-looking young woman. I introduced myself to him, and the spark of inspiration or recognition flashed in the eyes of both the jailer and this young woman when they heard my name. I explained the reason for my journey, to find my brother, if alive, or to see justice done upon his killer, if dead. And they regarded me as though they'd met a ghost. Geller announced with some sense of pride that Ichabod's murderer had already been caught, and the county executioner will consign him to hell before Sabbath day. The sad-looking woman seized my elbow and requested a word with me in private. She led me away to a fence row out of earshot of the jailhouse. She told me that Geller was a liar, that the man they'd arrested for Ichabod's murder, Abraham Van Brunt, a local ruffian whom the villagers knew as BROM Bones, was innocent. I asked her, "How can you know such things?"
Because I'm his wife. I am Katrina Van Brunt. And unless you help me prove his innocence, BROM Bones will be executed on All Saints' Day.
BROM Bones, Murderer, by Whitney Zahar. Narrated by Karyn Raynor, co-host of Chicklit Podcast, as Katrina.
Mrs. Van Brunt invited me to the tavern for some tea and honey cakes. She bade me to call her Katrina.
I have not been Mrs. Van Brunt for long. Before that, I was just the daughter of wealthy farm owner Baltus Van Tassel. No, Katrina is best. At least that name is my own.
As fate would have it, I feel as if I already know you. Brother Ichabod spoke of you often in his letters to me.
Did he indeed? I'm afraid I must apologize to you, to your brother. When I first met him, I'm ashamed to say I was a bit of a coquette. I was beautiful and witty, and I knew it well enough. I was aware of how I could incline my head, flutter my eyelashes, show a bit of my slippered foot, and place any young man from the hollow under my spell. The art of flirtation was akin to the caprices of magic to me. I liked Ichabod Crane a great deal. It was nice to have an intelligent, well-read young man in the village, who was not necessarily the rowdy, loud, good-natured sort that many of the Sleepy Hollow boys were. No, he wasn't handsome in the conventional sense, but I liked his looks well enough. When he wasn't leveled with anxiety or trying too hard to be someone he was not, Ichabod had a grace in his long limbs, and a confidence in his bearing that was quite attractive. However, I, being the coquette that I was, exulted in seeing two men fight over my attentions. There was Ichabod, and there was BROM. BROM, that is, Mr. Van Brunt, had been seeking my affection for as long as I could remember. He was direct in his feelings, He could be brutish at times, but he treated me like a queen when he courted me. Ichabod's courtship took the form of poetry and soft words, which appealed to me too. But Ichabod wanted more from life than what being married to a landed farmer's daughter from a small New York village could give. I suppose at heart I'm a simple girl. I rejected Ichabod's suit on the night he vanished, and when he was declared dead, the regret and guilt ate at my heart, and it still does. Not long after, BROM proposed marriage to me. My father was delighted. He admired BROM's swagger, charm, and good nature. I think he saw BROM as a son, as a protege, someone he could mentor. BROM was always good to me. And in something unprecedented among the landed gentry here, BROM insisted to my father that I should be left in control of the house, the land, and the running of the farm. BROM wanted me to hold on to who I am. He was also eager to honor my mother's wishes to see me as a bride. She wasn't in good health, and as I learned later, she wasn't long for this world. Our wedding day was quiet. Mother came downstairs on Father's arm, her body quivering by the sheer force of her will. Father didn't invite many people, only immediate family members, and the parson, of course, as he presided over the ceremony. I tried to focus only on BROM's dark eyes, which were full of love for me, and perhaps a touch of sadness. Did he know what was about to take place? I wonder. We had exchanged our vows and rings, and were about to drink wedding ale as a toast when Geller, the jailer, and Mr. Vanderhook, the town magistrate, appeared at the front door dangling the shackles in their hands. They clapped them about BROM's wrists and ankles, announced that he was under arrest for the murder of Ichabod Crane, and paraded him off to jail. Mother fainted on the spot, and within days, she passed away of a broken heart. Father did everything he could afford to do. He hired the best lawyers to defend BROM's innocence and good name. The trials and appeals of BROM's case have been the events of the past year. Father died when BROM was finally convicted and sentenced to death. My husband has languored in the jailhouse ever since. The whole town turned against BROM during the trial. It was well known that he rivaled Ichabod for my affections, and he made no secret of the fact that he disliked Ichabod because of it. BROM had a temper, it's true. He was brash and more likely to pick and finish a fight. But murder? After his sentence, I faced him through the bars in the jail, and I asked him, "BROM, did you do it? Did you kill Ichabod Crane?" He didn't bluster. He didn't scold me for lack of faith in my husband. He simply said, "No." I've known BROM Bones all my life, Miss Crane. He has his faults, but murderous intent is not one of them.
Where is the town magistrate now, Mr. Vanderhook?
He was sent to fetch the county executioner. By the time he returns, it'll be too late for BROM.
If your beloved husband is innocent, who then could have slain my brother? It is my understanding that Ichabod's mortal remains have not been discovered.
Just Ichabod's trampled hat and a smashed pumpkin in the road. Poor BROM was convicted solely on the strength of circumstantial evidence and petty gossip. I have no inkling of who your brother's killer is, if indeed he was killed. But I have not yet told you all. A nightmare has troubled my sleep for the past week, and I cannot help but wonder if it was not a portent of your arrival in Sleepy Hollow. In the dream, it is twilight, and I am strolling around the schoolhouse. No one has been in that place for nearly a year, you see. No schoolmaster has come to replace Mr. Crane, and in his absence, the good people of Tarrytown are content with the parson's catechisms to educate their children, and don't mind having all those little hands free to do chores the rest of the day. And so, the building is overgrown and silent. But in my dream, I walk inside and see Ichabod's shadowy form appear. He stands there, tall and gaunt, his tattered cloak drifting around him in a non-existent wind. His eyes are wide and shadowed, haunted. I'm frozen in place. I cannot take my eyes off him. His pale lips are moving so fast, yet no sound escapes. I'm trying to decipher what he is attempting to say when he rushes toward me, pointing to the doorway. Then the most frightening thing of all, his head tumbles off his shoulders and rolls at my feet, eyes wide and staring madly up at me.
Believe me when I tell you, dear Bessie, that Katrina's hands shook while recounting her dream, and both of our faces were soaked with tears. I reached across the table and grabbed her hands and said, my brother was devoted to a study of the occult. Though I must confess, I didn't always believe him. I thought they were just wild tales and superstitions. But here, in this haunted hollow, I think Ichabod may very well be trying to tell you something. Trying to tell us something from beyond the grave, if indeed it is in the grave he resides.
If that be the case, Eliza, would you accompany me to the schoolhouse? This building was venerable even when I was a small girl, long before Ichabod Crane tarried here.
The wilderness was reaching out to reclaim the spot. The lonely small shack was tangled with roots and grasses, with birds building nests in the eaves and rabbits peeking their curious noses through the old path to the front door. The shutters and the door were faded in their colors and hanging from their hinges. The little wattle and daub chimney was steadily dissolving from the effects of wind, rain, snow, and time. Katrina and I stood together, holding hands, staring through its threshold. "Shall we go in?" I asked. Katrina led me towards the doorway, and we peeked through the building's gloom. Leaves, mud, and the scat of animals were strewn across the wooden floorboards. The desks and the benches lay topsy-turvy around the little room. A slate board hung crookedly on the back wall. Our feet creaked across the floorboards. "Ichabod," I whispered. "Are you here?" "I'm here with your friend, Katrina. Did you send a dream to her? Please tell us what you want us to know." It felt like the place was holding its breath when suddenly a piece of chalk rose from the rubble on the old teacher's desk. I gasped, grabbing Katrina's hand. "If it is you, Brother Ichabod," I shouted, my voice cracking from the dust and tears, "kindly refrain from frightening us. We are here to help you. In Katrina's dream, you pointed at the door. What knowledge would you have us learn from that door, Ichabod?" Now, I am certain you will not believe me, Cousin Bessie, but the chalk hovered, quivering in the air as it drifted to the slate board. It scrawled some words, and it was writing in Ichabod's unmistakably pointy, cramped hand. I knew Katrina recognized it too, because her face turned pale. but her eyes brightened. The words read, "Door. Above." We exchanged glances, then dragged one of the students' benches to the doorway with a flurry of scattering insects and clouds of dust. I held the bench steady while Katrina, who was taller than I, perched on it and reached around the top of the doorway. When she stopped searching with her hands, she slowly dropped to a seated position on the bench, wiping her face with the flat of her hand. In the other, she held a puppet. I drew in a breath and sat beside her. We studied the puppet in the dim schoolhouse. Someone laid a curse here. Ichabod would have known about such things.
Well, Miss Crane, you ventured to a haunted schoolhouse with me. Are you now willing to join me in meeting a witch?
The cottage is not nigh from here. Her name is Abigail Van Gool, by the way. She's known to practice the black arts. But quite frankly, the old hag might not talk to us. If that be the case, we might learn something from old Van Ripper.
Is that the man who lent my brother his horse? I've already spoken to him in the tavern at noontime before meeting you. The horse my brother rode that night, Gunpowder, died not long after his disappearance. Van Ripper said he rendered the old nag down for tallow, which he used for making candles and salves. Gunpowder was a good and faithful servant until the end. When I asked about Ichabod's state of mind that night, Van Ripper pushed his straw tricorn hat high up on his head and told me they only spoke of the weather and of the year's harvest and and of your beauty, Katrina.
Oh.
He did say one thing odd, that Ichabod had heard a rumor about a necromancer practicing his craft in the deep woods surrounding Sleepy Hollow. Ichabod told Van Ripper that he wasn't really surprised. That sounds like my brother. He told Van Ripper that if he'd lived 100 years in the past, he'd have sussed out this necromancer and had him hanged for a witch. Ichabod always fancied himself a witch-finder general, like his hero, Cotton Mather.
This is it. See the plume of smoke rising up over the hedge? That's her cottage. Better let me do most of the talking.
Believe me when I tell you, dear sweet cousin Bessie, that this cottage was a foreboding place, and infected with some of the most revolting smells. The witch, Abigail Van Gool, as it so happens, was expecting our arrival. Perhaps she had divined this knowledge from reading the portents in the bubbling of her cauldron. Katrina bade me hold my tongue with this weird woman, but Miss Van Gool addressed me directly.
There be as much evil in the Hollow as there be in all the unexplored heathen country in the Western Territories. The evil in Tarrytown disguises itself, but the evil that frolics through these woods doesn't bother to hide its true nature. There be those men and women who seem fancy and respectable in town, but who meet with the devil in the back of yon hedge. You pretty little girls came looking for answers from old Abigail? I'll tell you what I can about these woods and what I know of your Mr. Ichabod. These woods be as ancient and dark as those in the old country, and the things that dwell here are as strange as any tale from my mother's homeland. the one she left in the belly of a Dutch slaver ship. I know of such unnatural things, for I have seen them.
The Testament of Abigail Van Gool by Amber Jourdan. Narrated by Chauncey K. Robinson, host of YouTube's Production Tales from Hell.
As you look for your Mr. Ichabod, be mindful of those folk you come across. There be men who walk about. Ooh, they look so nice to the eyes. They be dressed as fine gentlemen. Gentlemen fine enough to marry, but of the type who will always pass over a faithful lass for the bed of a fairer maiden. How many times have you been that fairer maiden, Miss Katrina? Once you touch these men, you are fully under the spell. They will offer to take you off your aching feet, which seems a nice respite. But then they hold you fast. You cannot escape them, as though ye be stuck with tar. And then, the man is no man, but a terrifying beast.
That's very interesting, but we're not looking for a man to marry. Hell, I'm already married. We're looking for the man who killed Ichabod Crane.
Not only men, no, indeed. Women in the wood be just as treacherous, and not all the dangers lurk in the hollow. In Tarrytown there be misfortune too. There's the risk of ruin, like as what happened to our parson, the Right Honorable Reverend Jasper Voss, and his poor missus. They had the most beautiful baby girl, named her Natalie, for she be born on the eve of the Christ child's nativity. A tiny little thing who came into this world whining and a-wallering, fit to raise the dead.
You lie. The parson never had a child.
No child that you know of, to be certain. But I know, because I attended her. Upon Christmas Eve 6 years ago, the parson kept his wife hidden while the babe was a-growing in her belly. And the night she was born, the good Reverend himself came to me.
But why? Surely, if word had gotten out that a saintly man such as he was seen consulting with...
He came to me because his newborn babe was afflicted with Satan's skin, and no amount of praying or Bible thumping would work. Oh, it was just a patch at first, like a hairy callus on the babe's forearm. But it spread, it grew, it jagged. The skin spread so quickly that in the time it took Reverend Voss to travel here from the parsonage and gather me up, it had overtaken the infant's entire arm, and her left shoulder to boot. Mrs. Voss was wailing, fit to drown out the baby's cries. I gave her a tincture to calm her nerve. Now you know me, I don't put much stock in the Reverend's Jesusin, and even less in his devil. But I never refuse a family in need, especially with a tiny baby. For 3 days and 3 nights I attended that child, bringing all my powers and all my craft to bear on shedding that child of the devil's flesh. But in spite of all of my efforts, the dark callus grew. And by dusk of Childermas, it had eaten up that child utterly.
How horrible! What became of the child?
For certain, the innocent baby died the moment there was naught of her own skin left for the devil to consume. What remained was a false, demonic creature, writhing in agony and screaming to be fed with blood. Human blood. When night fell, and while the Reverend prayed, mouth dry, great leathery wings sprouted from the child's back. It took flight, fluttering all about the house like a trapped moth. Me and the Reverend tried to snatch it from the air. After many minutes of this struggle, the demon child perched upon his mother's shoulder. It whispered in her ear as she became transfixed, as if she be in a devilish trance. She, as a zombie, with the winged imp still on her shoulder, unbolted the door and let the thing free. It flew into the deepest, wildest corner of Sleepy Hollow and has not been seen since. But on some nights, ye can hear a weird cry echoing in the woods. I take a gold watch that those cries pour from the lungs of that demon. The moment Mrs. Voss realized what she'd done, that she'd turned the demon loose and would never see her baby again, she went out of her mind. She seized an oil lamp and set out into the woods after the little imp. Me and the Reverend gave chase, but the missus ran with devilish speed. She stopped in a clearing and sobbed, knowing that she'd never find her baby, and even if she did, it would forever be in this unnatural shape. But before we could reach the missus, she poured the oil from the lantern onto her body and set herself ablaze. She howled an ungodly howl as the flames crept up her dress and melted her pretty face. By and by we reached her, but there was naught left of the woman but a puddle of rendered fat and a charred skeleton. Next day, Reverend Voss spread a rumor that his wife had left to Boston to care for her sick aunt. And then, not long after her supposed arrival in Boston, Reverend Jasper Voss spread the false news that a brewery wagon and 4 horses ran his wife down in the street. That story was enough to satisfy the curiosity of the dumb country bumpkins who reside in this vicinity.
That part rings true enough. I've heard tell of the Reverend's wife meeting her end beneath a team of horses.
And so no one, except me, I suppose, would ever know about that strange birth or about how the missus truly died.
But why do you keep silent, Miss Van Gool? Surely the parson's grave hypocrisy would be of great interest to his flock, the God-fearing folk of Tarrytown. Would not exposing the truth help bring peace to this poor woman's soul, wherever it may now reside?
I keep silent because I know what will maintain my good health. I know that Reverend Voss is a powerful and well-respected man hereabouts. I would not be walking this earth for long if I got into the habit of blabbing the secrets of powerful men to gossipy Dutch housemaids.
Then why tell us?
Because of the Headless Horseman. I fear him just like everyone in the Hollow, but still, he is my friend. Many's a night I've seen him, usually on nights when the moon was nigh full, so that even through all these trees moonlight could stream in, brightening our little hollow as like a bonfire's light. I often take the path through the cemetery, making sure to stay in the shadows and as quiet as a whisper. Can't never tell what strange folk are about. Who is to say I would even be missed if I ran afoul of a highwayman, devil worshippers, or spooks and specters? No, I always creep quietly through the moonlight shadows, watching the night for signs and portents. One night, I got to a little parting of the trees that looked right into the heart of the graveyard. There, standing full illuminated in the bright moonlight, was the horseman himself, headless, with his inky cloak billowing in the wind. Except there weren't no wind. The air was as still as dead man's breath, and yet his cloak all aflutter. He was hitching his horse to a headstone. Nothing from Mr. ICHABOD's book could match such a frightful scene. I watched as his horse whined, as though he be spooked. 3 figures in dark cloaks all approached the horseman from different sides, and I decided their noisy arrival would be a good cover for my silent exit. I cannot tell ye with whom the Headless Horseman was making this rendezvous. No one good, that's for certain. A fortnight ago this was. Only a fortnight. Yet, I've known the specter all my life. I've grown accustomed to seeing him every night the moon changes. And in all that time, I've never seen him with weird folk about. And that tells me something is askew about that old spirit. Something unbalanced. He is the Lord and Master, Commander-in-Chief of all the airy spirits of Sleepy Hollow. So if there's something afoul with the horseman, then there's something rotten in the whole damn hollow. So, Miss Katrina, maybe I tell you these secrets because I believe your headless friend wants to see justice done for your poor sweetheart, Mr. BROM Bones. Maybe the horseman wants to make sure that no man gets any credit for a chopped off head in this hollow. Save for him. Savvy?
The witch's admonitions to steer clear of the water and any hooved men, and the parson, for he is the worst of them all, played in my head like nursery rhymes. What's more, Abigail had told us, almost in passing, that she herself had seen Brother Ichabod in a secluded glen, not a stone's throw from the cemetery, no more than a fortnight ago. Could he truly be alive? Or could this be more trickery from the spirit realm? I must confess, dear cousin, that the notion gave me a renewed sense of hope. A westerly path led to the cemetery, which Katrina assured me was only a short walk away, though the distance seemed to expand in the gathering twilight. I stumbled with affright at the distant sound of shrieking high and shrill. Katrina began searching the canopy overhead with eyes wide. We made haste to the cemetery, fearing the cries were of a phantom foretelling the coming of death. We found the cemetery glowing a hazy gold through the last filtered rays of sunlight. The screeching had receded, but here there were no birds singing, nor were there any insects chirping or small rodents at play in the fallen leaves. We opened the gate and immediately saw the fresh tracks made by boots and horseshoes. A strange sign for such a lonely, disused cemetery. I wonder, could those be the tracks of the Headless Horseman?
If they belong to the horseman, then Old Man Brewer must cobble his boots for him. You can see the mark of Brewer's trade in the boot track. I suspect these tracks were made by the folk of Tarrytown, not a spook. Now, who would rip up a Bible? Look there. Pages from a High German Bible shredded to ribbons, strewn about and trampled underfoot.
There are more of them here, placed with some strange intent upon these gravestones. Is this merely the blasphemy, or some wrong-headed ruffian,
or someone trying to ward off evil? Perhaps that crazy old witch knows more about the happenings in this cemetery than she told us.
Remnants of fire, also. Something foul's happened here.
Look, out there, in the center of the graveyard.
Bessie, you would commend me for the great care with which I watched the ground as I made my way into the heart of the cemetery. I saw more items strewn about the graves, but no more pages of scripture. I beheld a key and some gold teeth, pieces of silver, broken bits of a bridle, 4 horseshoes, the dead carcasses of black mice, rats and cats, even a skunk, all laid out in a circle around the fire. The smell of dead animals was so wretched My stomach heaves, recalling how those odors invaded my nostrils. Who could have done this, I wondered? Who would find all these dead things and carry them here? We looked on in horror at the gruesome and grotesque scene before our eyes. And then we saw the flicker of torchlight. There were people approaching. Then we heard their voices. Katrina seized me by the elbow and hid among some dense hedges. Then the graveyard filled with light as several men and 2 women approached. I was not acquainted with the townsfolk well enough to know who they were, but I could make out a handful of men and 2 women. The people were conversing, but we could not make out what was said. Something about the master, a prized horse, a bride. Then there was a rush of movement and torchlight, and then, sweet cousin, I can report nothing of what happened, for I felt a sudden, sharp pain, and all went black. 80. Oh, Bessie, you would commend me for the great care with which I watched the ground as I made my way into the heart of the cemetery. I saw more items strewn about the graves, but no more pages of scripture. I beheld a key and some gold teeth, pieces of silver, broken bits of a bridle, 4 horseshoes, the dead carcasses of black mice, rats, and cats, even a skunk, all laid out in a circle around the fire. The smell of dead animals was so wretched. My stomach heaves, recalling how those odors invaded my nostrils. Who could have done this, I wondered? Who would find all these dead things and carry them here? We looked on in horror at the gruesome and grotesque scene before our eyes. And then we saw the flicker of torchlight. There were people approaching. Then we heard their voices. Katrina seized me by the elbow and hid among some dense hedges. Then the graveyard filled with light as several men and 2 women approached. I was not acquainted with the townsfolk well enough to know who they were, but I could make out a handful of men and 2 women. The people were conversing, but we could not make out what was said. Something about the master, a prized horse, a bride. Then there was a rush of movement and torchlight, and then, sweet cousin, I can report nothing of what happened, for I felt a sudden, sharp pain, and all went black. A blue mist shrouded a shadowy figure. I stood rooted to the spot, unable to move, arms rigid at my sides. My eyes widened as the figure emerged from the mist, and it was my beloved brother, Ichabod. I couldn't reach for him. My tongue was swollen in my mouth, though I was desperate to cry out his name.
Eliza.
Ichabod's voice was strange, high-pitched, yet familiar. Genuine fear etched his pallid face. His head wobbled upon his bloody neck, as though it was crudely or improperly affixed.
Eliza, wake up. Wake up, Eliza, please.
Why is Katrina's voice issuing from Ichabod's mouth, and with such urgency? I closed my eyes for a moment, and then they flew back open. I was lying flat on my back on a hard, cold surface. The chill of it ripped through my skin, chilling me into the very marrow of my bones. I tried to sit up, but my outstretched arms were lashed fast with coarse hemp rope, chafing my wrists. Above me was a black sky full of stars and the vivid orange glow of fiery torches. I turned my head, scraping my cheek against the cold stone. My eyes widened to see Katrina standing upright, her body ramrod against a gnarled tree trunk. Her golden hair tumbled loose down her back, her bodice torn, and her face covered with bruises. Katrina, what's happening? Are you hurt?
Not terribly. You should see the wretch who tied me here. I got in a few good licks. Left a scar on his face to remember me by, I'll warrant.
But why?
I'm glad to see you're awake at last, Miss Crane.
Yes, Bessie. I'm sure you might have guessed by now that this was the sonorous voice of the town parson, Reverend Jasper Voss. He bent over me, tenderly brushing a loose strand of hair behind my ear.
Forgive me, but for reasons too dull to expand upon, you must be bound to this altar. Normally, the bride would be standing tall beside her groom during such happy occasions. However, I cannot risk you running away from your future husband.
My husband?
Yes, of course. The Headless Horseman is, I'll grant you, quite monstrous. But there is tenderness within him also. Having acquainted himself with your brother, I'm certain he will look upon you with all the fondness he can muster.
I began to struggle more on the cross-shaped altar, and I heard Katrina gasp as figures emerged from the shadows of the torches. At least 6 of them. They drew back the hoods on their cloaks, their faces revealed in the torchlight.
Then Ripper? Is that you?
Indeed. The cultists who attended us were Ichabod's old landlord, the magistrate, the town's midwife, the innkeeper, and Geller, the jailer, whose face bore Katrina's scratch marks. Another man who I had not met, I later learned was the local doctor.
Why are you all here? You're Tarrytown's most respected citizens. You were friends of my father. What part do you mean to play in this dark farce?
Yes. Geller, will you, kindly silence the witness? Those who bear witness must be mute.
He slapped her hard across the face. Katrina cried out as her lips split and her head knocked hard against the tree. No! Leave her alone, please! Why are you doing all of this? Did you truly murder my brother?
Peace, Geller. I wanted you to gag her, not knock her brains out.
Geller grumbled as he secured a stinking handkerchief into Katrina's mouth. Katrina glared at him with fire in her eyes. Reverend Voss gestured to the midwife.
Come, prepare the bride.
The old crone hobbled forward with a slight bow. She approached me with a curved, wicked knife.
Frau Thomason is going to untie you, Miss Crane. But then she will secure your wrists together. I suggest you don't make any plans to run. You are surrounded. We are far outside of town. If you foolishly decide to run, I will simply order Miss Van Brunt's death. And her blood will be most assuredly upon your hands.
I forced myself to remain still as the midwife tied my wrists behind my back. Why are you doing this? The parson's black cloak flowed behind him as he moved to an altar covered with candles, skulls, and an ebony book. He waved towards the male acolytes as they positioned themselves around the altar in the configuration of an inverted cross.
Well, it is all quite simple, Miss Crane. You see, I dream of a world where all are equal, where everyone has enough to eat, everyone can control their destiny. Sadly, we don't live in such a world. I learned this and all the secrets of hell the night my child was born.
The midwife draped a snow-white robe over my shoulders. But you are a man of God! Surely you have influence to appeal to your parishioners' better natures!
Mortal men have no better nature. Alas, I am not a patient man, Miss Crane, especially in the wake of a war that changed the face of our country. We have the opportunity for sweeping changes, and yet no one is taking them, especially in this hollow, where everyone is either trembling in fear and superstition or tarrying about, staring into their cups, too slow and drunk and stupid to notice the world turning and leaving them all behind. Drink and complacency and fear keep them standing motionless. No, Miss Crane, fear is the most incredible power of all, and if I can control such fear, I will be unstoppable. And so it falls to me to give something to the horseman, to sweeten the pot for him, as it were.
So, I am to be some unholy offering? You lured me here so that I could be wedded to the horseman, in exchange for what? For his obedience? Ha! Well, if I learned anything from Captain Diedrich Knickerbocker, it is that the evil spirits of the earth and air have no master, save for the fallen one himself.
Funny you should mention Captain Knickerbocker. He has been attending you this whole time. It was rude of you not to greet him.
With this, the parson picked up the boiled and polished skull that had been laid upon the altar and, in a grotesque and obscene pantomime, began working the jaws of the skull as if to make it speak.
Hello, Miss Eliza. I'm sad that you do not recognize me in this sorry state.
Knickerbocker was a fool to take on your case, and twice the fool to walk into the trap that I, or rather Mr. Fox, laid out for him when you wouldn't answer my summons in person.
So you sent the letter?
Yes, of course. And the hank of your brother's hair with it. Snipped it from the back of his head myself.
He finished lighting the candles and picked up an obsidian bowl that was filled with a scarlet liquid. Each cultist, starting with the town magistrate, took a pious sip from the vessel, the thick red coating their lips. Meanwhile, Katrina gritted her teeth with satisfaction. Being married to BROM taught her many things. Being able to hold her own in a quick tussle was one of those things, as Geller could attest from the scratches on his face. Another thing is how to get herself out of tight jams, if she found herself in such a predicament. Geller might have been good at securing a man behind iron bars and manacles, but he was lost when it came to making knots and accidentally tying a feisty woman to a tree with her apron strings. Katrina's writhing, scraped fingers touched her chatelaine and her collection of keys and sharp sewing scissors. It took a few minutes of silent wiggling, but the scissor blades eventually frayed the bonds enough for Katrina to set herself free. Frau Thomason, the midwife, laid dark red roses in a circle around the altar where I sat. She accepted the ceremonial bowl from Reverend Voss with a simpering bow and dipped her fingers into the liquid. Then she began to paint symbols on my face, arms, and upper chest. I recoiled at the crone's touch and her dreadful, thick, coppery scent.
Miss Crane, believe me that I do not want your brother murdered. Leading him to the horseman's thirsty blade was all too easy, alas. Your brother's blood was mixed into the paint, which now marks you as the bride of the Headless Horseman. All men Even dead men will do anything for love. My letter summoned you, and now you are here, dressed in white, coated in the stain of your brother's blood, to be wedded to a dark bridegroom for all eternity. And after receiving his bride, the Headless Horseman will be mine to command.
I screamed, not from horror, but to help conceal the sounds of Katrina's flight from the macabre ritual scene. Whether to save herself or to bring help, I knew not. But I was glad that she had escaped whatever dreadful fate the cultists had in store for her. A bizarre, sickly sweet smell emanated from the torches and the candles, making my vision swim. If you had guessed, Cousin Bessie, that these were vapors from burning tannis root, you would be correct. I felt as though my own head was going to fall off. The parson intoned words in a dark language that twisted my gut. I doubled over, clutching my abdomen and gasping for breath. He moved with dark grace as he placed several bloody, disembodied heads on the altar, their faces frozen in abject horror. The only head I recognized was the mummified but still familiar face of Ichabod. Some preserving liquid, I suspect, dripped from his neck stump, pooling with the flesh red draining from the other heads. A black mist swirled around the whole dark company in the woods. A vibration filled the air, along with the drumming of hoofbeats. And a wave of awe filled the circle as every gaze looked upon the dark figure mounted on a black horse, its breath steaming in the night air. With a booming shout, the large horseman with no head upon his broad shoulders surged forward and swept me into his strong arms. I shrieked and tried to push away, but he held me tight, spurred his steed, and leapt away, galloping into the woods.
Wait, no, I have not given you my commands.
I thought I would be cold in the Headless Horseman's arms, but instead, as he held me close, I felt warm and safe. The black horse bearing us away from the ritual galloped, was slick with sweat. My heartbeat matched the rhythm of the horse's gallop. The Headless Horseman cried, "Whoa!" in a muffled voice issuing from behind the folds of his black coat. From within his chest. He pulled the horse's reins, slowing it down to a stop. The horseman whistled, and a figure stepped from behind a tree. My eyes widened with recognition. Katrina?
Mr. and Mrs. Van Brunt at your service.
I turned to see the horseman dismount gracefully and remove his cloak. Before me stood BROM Bones. He had strapped a couple of bales of thick pillows on either side of his head to simulate the appearance of shoulders. The cloak draped over to give the appearance of a headless man. He chuckled. The ghost of a smile on his weary face betrayed the good humor for which the burly young man was known. He bowed and hastily apologized for all the ill he caused for my late brother. "How did you free BROM? From the jail, I mean."
With a little white magic. I'll explain later. Come, our night isn't over yet. Let's fly to the Van Tassel farmhouse. We have plans to make and more to do.
With great haste, BROM harnessed Daredevil to a disused hay wain concealed in the brush. Then BROM and Daredevil galloped away in the night, pulling Katrina and I in the hay wain as fast as they could convey us. I imagine dear Bessie, that you're wondering what became of the wicked Reverend Jasper Voss and the other cultists. Heaven only knows, not I. But when we returned to the ritual's circle in the hollow, in the cold light of day, we found the remnants of a massacre. Abigail von Ghoul was there too, picking through the carnage for signs and portents. She told us that she had beheld some, but not all, of the horrible events which unfolded after we escaped. But to the best of our reckoning, this is what happened. The cultists, believing BROM's counterfeit Hessian to be the true horseman, quickly lost faith in the parson's dark arts and his ability to command the legendary specter. Reverend Voss flew into a rage, slitting the throat of the doctor. Perhaps he was the chief mutineer. As the doctor bled out on the ground, Reverend Voss sawed his head clean off his body. The other cultists watched in horror, flinching back as the blood-stained parson rose to his feet and plopped the fresh head upon the altar. The mist pulsed around them, and the torches and candles flared brighter than ever. As the cult hushed, hoofbeats approached as the Headless Horseman appeared within the ring of firelight. The horseman's steed, known as Chieftain, or so we were told by Abigail, shook his head, the iron and bone chains of his bridle tinkling like the bells of the dead. The white markings were stark on Chieftain's black head, making the shape of a skull with burning red eyes. Chieftain's mane and feathers were like long, shaggy black crow's wings, beaded with human finger bones and the skulls of small birds. The terrifying steed breathed heaving breaths, belching out flame from his mouth and nostrils. The Headless Horseman, still wearing his Hessian uniform stained with blood, his robust frame was wrapped in a black cloak, draped like black smoke over both horse and rider, in such a way that they appeared as one. A foul wind blew through and stirred the horseman's cloak, flaring it in such a way that the gathered company swore they saw the leathery wings of a demon. Reverend Voss cleared his throat and approached the Headless Horseman, bowing low.
I bid you welcome, horseman. Forgive the wavering faith of these peasant fools. But now that you have come forth, it is time for you to retrieve your bride. Go, horseman, do my bidding and claim Eliza Crane. Take the head of Katrina Van Brunt as well.
There was a breathless moment as the horseman remained still. Smoke and fire rose from the gap where the head should have rested, sparking like flames around a campfire during the war. It flashed briefly into the appearance of a skeletal face, before vanishing into the thick smoke that reeked of black powder. The Headless Horseman raised his sword, the edges blazing red as if flesh from an iron forge, fueled by the hellfire and damnation. He swung, and with a hiss of smoke, the parson's head flew off in a spray of hot blood. The townsfolk spoke later of the screams and wails that echoed through the woods that night. Through it all was the clatter of hoofbeats and the singing of a blade. We were the first souls brave enough to venture back there, and we discovered the headless bodies of Reverend Voss, the doctor, the magistrate, Van Ripper, the innkeeper, Geller, and Fräulein Thomason. They lay scattered on the ground, their neck wounds burned and cauterized from a hellish blade. Blood painted the trees, branches, and the cross-shaped altar in hellish shades of crimson and scarlet. All the heads were missing, never to be found again. The pile of bodies was wreathed in a circle of hoofprints in the dirt, hoofprints which were burned into the ground. At noontime on All Saints' Day, the country executioner arrived in Tarrytown, and upon finding the jailhouse empty and the jailer and magistrate missing, he simply turned around and went home. The bureaucracy of justice, it would seem, moves differently here than in Manhattan. In any event, he would not have found BROM and Katrina, for they left the Hollow shortly after finding the horrible scene in the woods. They departed on Daredevil, taking with them only what they could carry. I dare say they've done what Captain Knickerbocker thought my brother had done, picked up and started a new life under new names. Abigail had given Katrina a spell book which will prove useful in matters of disappearing. She promised to write me in a few months' time, using an agreed-upon cipher that only she and I can decode. That was nearly a week ago. I've been staying at the inn until I've regained enough strength to begin the journey home. Tarrytown is quite lovely in the fall, now that the awful shadow of this necromancer's cult has lifted. I've hired a coach to take me back to Manhattan at cock crow. Pray that my journey is peaceful and free of incident. Until we meet again, sweet Cousin Bessie, I remain faithfully yours, Eliza Crane. Postscript. Last night, I found myself tarrying along the brook and wandering near the bridge where Ichabod's hat was found. It was right at sundown. Night fell swiftly over the sky like a hand blocking out the light of a candle. My heart froze as I heard the hoofbeats of 2 horses. For it was not only the Headless Horseman astride chieftain who crossed the bridge at full gallop, holding aloft his red saber. No, now there was another spectral rider. Behind him there was poor, pitiful brother Ichabod, his lanky frame mounted forevermore on old gunpowder. He resembled a ghostly scarecrow eloped from a cornfield, holding his own head in the crook of his elbow. With his long snipe nose, he stared contentedly out into the night, like a weathercock watching where the autumn wind may blow.
You have been listening to The Brides of Sleepy Hollow, adapted especially for Octoberpod by John Eiger, from stories written by Amber Jourdan, Whitney Zahar, Dan B. Fierce, and Jane Nightshade. From an original idea by Edward October, inspired by Washington Irving's tale, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. In the cast you heard Ari Shey as Eliza Crane, Karyn Raynor, co-host of Chick Lit Podcast as Katrina Van Brunt, Tom O'Connor as Captain Knickerbocker, Chauncey K. Robinson, host of YouTube's Production Tales from Hell, as Abigail Van GOOL, with Edward October as the Parson, Reverend Jasper Voss. The Brides of Sleepy Hollow was produced, edited, and directed for Octoberpod by Edward October, with additional editing by Kevin, host of the Jury Room Podcast. Stick around after the credits for a brief word from some of our fellow indie podcasters creators, and friends. There may even be some bloopers, outtakes, and bonus content as well. You have been listening to Octoberpod. Octoberpod is produced, edited, and directed by Edward October. The series co-producers are M.J. McAdams and Amber Jourdan. Logo and banner graphics by Jessica Good. Edward October character design by Nick Calavera. Select still photography courtesy of Unsplash.com. Select music cues by Dr. Dreamchip and various other stock music and sound effects courtesy of freesound.org. Music from Bigfoot Apocalypse and Thorax, theme from Octoberpod, composed by Nico Vitezi. All other images, music, and FX cues, except where noted, are sourced from within the public domain. Follow us on YouTube at Octoberpod Home Video, on Instagram, and the app I still call Twitter at Octoberpod VHS, and on TikTok and Blue Sky at Octoberpod. Or find us and all of our links on the World Wide Web at octoberpodvhs.com. For business inquiries or story submissions, email octoberpod@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this program, we'd be very pleased if you told your friends about us. And while you're at it, write us a 5-star or equivalent review wherever you're listening. The man who spoke to you was Mr. Edward October.
You feel that? A sudden chill, a tingle down your spine?
It's not a draft, is it?
No, it's the unmistakable sign that we found them. The most terrifyingly delicious ghost stories you've ever heard.
And trust us, we've had some close calls.
We're talking haunted hallways, phantom apparitions, and things that go bump in the night. All served up on our new show, Ghost Bites.
Join us as we dig into the spectral secrets and spooky sightings that will have you sleeping with the lights on.
So if you're brave enough, come grab a bite with us.
Just try not to let it be your last.
Ghost Bites, streaming now on all your favorite podcast platforms.
Hi, I'm Karen.
And I'm Aubrey.
And this is Chicklit, a literature comedy podcast where we enjoy getting lit and talking about books we love and love to roast.
We also talk about personal opinions and quote The Office so much that we've made it into a drinking game.
We've been friends for over a decade, so grab your drink of choice and join us for some shenanigans.
I'm Pitney.
And I'm Amelia.
And we're from
Pitney and Amelia's Bitchin' Boutique. Who are we?
Why, we're your new best friends, of course.
Pull up a seat and listen in to what we think about people, places, and things.
Geeky stuff, horror movies, weirdos we know, spirituality, sexuality, food, filth.
It's like eavesdropping on the people at the next table for like an hour or so, and wishing you could join in on their conversation.
Also, do you see who just came in? Look at that hair.
Oh, honey, just no.
Bitchiness, you're soaking in it.
We soften your hands while you do the dishes.
Pitney and Amelia's Bitchin' Boutique.
We're here.
We're queer. And we're
in your ear. Every other Friday, where all the classiest podcasts are found.
Fuck it, we'll do it live. This is Sleepy Hollow. One Baker. I'm afraid I do not imbibe spirits of any kind. My doctor forbids it. The first take might actually be better. I'm going to start that over. Too fucking madrigal singing sounding. 24 Tango. Swipe of a sword, then head drops. Followed by maniacal laughter, motherfucker. Big ol' horror music sting.
80. Oh, Bessie.
For the chill of autumn. For the chill of... You hear that shit? You have been listening to... What do we call this? What number is this? We'll say it's number 138. It was probably more than that. Number 666. 999. Abigail von Ghoul, not to be confused with Abigail Gabagool, who is a Sopranos character.
A horse thing. with wild mane flying, lightning pulsing through it, blue and white light lacing through the hair, a mouth full of the fangs like a snake's, each one as long as your fingers and dripping with blood and gore. They take off at a gallop. They run so hard your bones crunch together inside you and break. The jagged bones stab you all inside as the nightmare horse keeps running. Blood pours from your eyes and your mouth as the monster keeps running. Your bones just keep breaking into smaller and smaller shards and slice through your flesh until piece by piece you are cut free of the frightful steed. Dead as a sack of drowned kittens, of course. No one has yet survived the night with one of these horrible bridegrooms. Stay away from hooved men and ye should be fine.
Normally the bride would be standing tall beside her. Normally the bride would be standing tall fuck me. 114.
Hello, Miss Eliza. I'm glad that you do not recognize me in this sorry state. Hello, Miss Eliza. I'm
50. Oh.
45, dramatic sting. All right, and we're going to fast forward all the way the fuck back to the end credits here, which I'm going to read forthwith. And Edward October as the parson, and Edward October as the parson, Reverend Jasper Voss. Fiend, 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 it's the end of my recording, yes it is. So fiend, fiend, fiend.